The fast fashion market makes up a large portion of the fashion industry, and it continues to grow as more consumers are beginning to prefer the low-cost, stylish clothing it offers. Companies like Zara, H&M, and Uniqlo have reshaped this industry and changed the way people buy clothes through their execution of the fast fashion business model. Collectively, the top companies sell over $150 billion worth of clothes annually and are on track to sell even more. This massive industry was initially made possible by the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s. Prior to the invention of textile machines and large-scale garment factories, people either made their own clothing or bought it from small shops locally. Clothing was not easily accessible, and the rare decision to add to one's wardrobe was a costly or time-consuming one. The invention of the sewing machine in 1846 and subsequent clothing-related innovations contributed to the rapid fall of clothing prices. However, the accessibility of clothing was still limited to small, local workshops. These workshops were using this new technology to their advantage by outsourcing some of their production, but nobody was attempting to bring it to a large, standardized scale. While lower prices enabled more consumers to buy from these shops, the business didn't change, and people continued to either make their own clothes or make the rare trip to a local dressmaker. The Second World War is what accelerated the pace of the fashion industry to reach its potential. Due to millions of people enlisted in the war, each requiring uniforms, fabric restrictions were placed on clothing. Restrictions varied by country, but some demanded up to a 15% reduction of textiles used in garments. Suits, jackets, and dresses all had restrictions placed on length, width, and even the amount of pockets. Aside from textiles having to be allocated to uniforms, key suppliers of certain materials were also being cut off, and some manufacturers couldn't adjust to these new limitations, leading to a drop in production and a rapid increase in clothing prices. England's response to these wartime supply issues was to begin the production of utility clothing. Utility clothing was based on the government's plan to make British factories more efficient while retaining quality despite the restrictions. Without a standardized form of production, people that weren't in the upper class would not have been able to afford the new price of clothes. This plan gave the public a guarantee of quality and value for their money. But it also standardized the process of clothing manufacturing for the first time, challenging designers and manufacturers to create stylish clothing at a low cost. Involving the same challenges modern fast fashion companies face, this was the birth of the industry that can be seen booming today. After the war ended, consumers were now accustomed to wearing mass-produced clothing, and designers were more comfortable creating with strict limitations. There was even a demand for it, as young people started to prefer the unique styles that came out of this new form of production and the low costs it enabled. This led to massive textile mills opening across the developing world, each using strategies created from war rationing. Established clothing workshops now had the potential to outsource their entire production to these factories to meet the new demands of fashion. One of the first companies to enter this market was a small clothing store in Spain that would later be called Zara. For 12 years before the first Zara store opened, owner Amancio Ortega ran this small workshop that produced dresses and gowns. After seeing demand and a more open mindset toward cheap, mass-produced clothing, he was motivated to pursue a new business model for his clothing production. In 1975, the small business of only 500 employees used its resources to open 2 garment factories and a new store called Zara. By 1983, Zara had 9 stores in the most prestigious and busiest areas of Spain, with plans to open more factories and distribution centers to handle the rising demand for its clothes. Just 6 years later, Zara opened its doors in New York, marking the beginning of the fast fashion explosion. New York Times even coined the term, using it to describe Zara's mission, stating that it would only take 15 days for a garment to go from a designer's mind to being sold in the store. This is the precise goal of fast fashion, to provide inexpensive clothing on a massive scale, in rapid response to consumer tastes. Although other companies explored this model around the same time, Zara was the first to execute it on a global scale. Prior to the arrival of Zara, the closest competition were stores often found in malls, such as American Eagle, Aeropostale, and Express. While these stores offered trendy clothing at low prices, they were not designed to quickly change their product line and inventory. Designs were made months or years in advance, and products sat on racks until everything was sold. Zara was able to quickly rise above stores like these by taking a different approach. It instead focused on strategies that allowed it to easily adjust production to meet customer demand. Instead of creating designs long before production, Zara is constantly designing and releasing new products. By doing this, Zara can immediately adjust to the ever-changing consumer tastes as well as the popular trends within fashion. It can even replicate designer collections that took months to create in just a few weeks at a fraction of the cost. To achieve such quick production, Zara has to shorten the time from design to distribution as much as possible. The closer its response is to real time, the more likely it'll be to meet short-term demand and the more clothing it will sell. For its entire product line, Zara creates around 40,000 designs annually, from which it chooses 10,000 to bring to reality. These designs are the basis of the 450 million items that Zara produces and sells each year. This incredible scale is necessary in the business as it requires constant change to meet customer demands, but Zara has made it surprisingly simple. It divides its production almost equally into two parts, the more fashionable and riskier items and the more basic, predictable items. The riskier items, which have a shorter life cycle, include items inspired by high-end designer collections and popular fashion trends. These products require the most testing and prototyping, so they are produced at one of the dozen Zara-owned factories in Spain, where they can be closely monitored. The other half of their production is dedicated to more simple, everyday clothing that has a longer life cycle. These clothes are easy to produce and don't risk going out of style, so they are outsourced to factories in Asia far in advance for cheaper production. But a big challenge for Zara is to keep track of the demand for so many unique items. Just like how it keeps a short production process, it also keeps an extremely short product life cycle to avoid the risk of overproduction. The longer an item is sitting in a store, the more likely it is to go out of style and end up on sale. To avoid having to discount large inventories of unsold items, Zara keeps close track of every item that passes through its logistics centers and quickly adjusts production based on in-store demand. Its strategy of introducing thousands of new items a year in small quantities actually reduces the potential losses associated with running out of an item. If a design doesn't sell out within a week, Zara withdraws it from production and pushes out a new design. Popular items selling out is more beneficial to the company because it doesn't have to risk having to eventually put it on sale, and worse, continue to produce it even though it's going unsold at the store level. The clothes are disposable to the consumer anyways, so they will just move on to the next best item, helping sell that one out as well. Zara doesn't ever want to dedicate too much of its inventory to one item because trends may completely change within a few weeks, leaving them with excess supply. Through this strategy, less than 10% of Zara's unsold inventory has to be discounted to sell, whereas the industry average is around 20%.
First of all, we can decide that an article is not selling well, so we can take it out of the collection. No problem at all, because we don't have stock. As we produce, we sell, we just send to the store, so it's not a problem of stock.
With all of these strategies applied to nearly 3,000 stores across 96 countries, Zara is the biggest fast fashion retailer, selling $33 billion worth of clothing each year. Zara has the advantage of being one of the first retailers to utilize this business model. However, there are many other companies that have developed their own strategies and competitive edge upon the same foundation. H&M, for example, has a nearly identical process as Zara, but yields different results due to a few slight changes. Instead of dedicating half of their production to risky, designer-inspired items like Zara, H&M takes a safer route and focuses 80% of their production on basic items that will not go out of style quickly. Only 20% of their product line is dedicated to risky, short-term items. Since they don't have to spend as much time on designing and prototyping, they can go without owning factories and are able to outsource their entire production. Like Zara, they closely monitor customer trends and store inventory to restock accordingly. Through larger marketing campaigns and a safer product line, H&M also focuses on creating more buying cycles. A traditional fashion retailer would prepare for the traditional 4 seasons, but retailers like H&M market for seasons 4 to 6 weeks long, creating more buying cycles for customers. This means people are going into the store much more often than a retailer who only releases around the 4 seasons. While they still quickly respond to customer demand, the majority of their product line is prepared longer in advance and is targeted to more seasons while avoiding overproduction of a single product. While H&M may not be as flexible as Zara, it still does well at accurately meeting consumer demand and gets people to frequently explore new products. This shows as they are the second largest fast fashion retailer with over $27 billion in annual sales. Some fast fashion companies go a completely different route, like Uniqlo, which completely ignores high fashion trends and quick response, but instead creates its own simple but essential lines of clothing. Uniqlo intentionally keeps its product line extremely simple and focuses on core products that are based around a limited range of fabrics. Since the range of materials it uses are common across all of the designs, Uniqlo is able to consolidate its fabric buys into huge orders that give it greater negotiation power against suppliers. This strategy allows the company to produce the highest quality items relative to price. While Zara has built its business on rapidly responding to fast-changing fashion trends, getting items from factory to store in 2 weeks, Uniqlo takes the opposite approach, planning production of essentials up to a year in advance. It also puts its effort into innovation, something rare in the fast fashion world. Its investment has allowed it to create affordable product lines using fabric innovations, making Uniqlo the go-to place for these new types of clothes. Its strategy has proven to work, as the company has rapidly grown to the third largest fast fashion retailer with annual sales of nearly $20 billion. Each of these companies share the same challenges of rapidly meeting consumer demand of low-priced, stylish clothing, and they each have achieved success through their own unique strategies. But these companies also share the same challenge of operating in a sustainable and ethical manner to preserve their business through the future. The fashion industry naturally creates massive amounts of waste, both on the producer side and the consumer side. Unfortunately, the pace of innovation in the production of clothing has not followed the pace of how they are designed and marketed. The process of creating clothing is resource intensive and causes massive amounts of pollution, and has not changed much since the Industrial Revolution. Companies also have to rely on third-party suppliers to meet cost demands, who, if left unchecked, may resort to horrible labor practices. These issues go both ways though, as consumers continue to support the market of fast fashion and the hidden costs that make it possible. Consumers also tend to throw away large amounts of clothes after only wearing them a few times, contributing to the waste the industry creates. Companies realize these issues and understand that as the industry grows, it will eventually become completely unsustainable. In response to this, companies have worked together to develop standards and practices for production. Public commitments to these standards hold the industry accountable for the ethics of their business, and also helps pass down responsibility to the consumer as well. But the industry has also created good, as it has produced methods for accessible, low-cost clothing, which was once a luxury even for developed countries. Global demand for this type of clothing is set to increase even more in the near future, not only presenting more opportunity for the business, but also for minimizing the risks involved to meet such high expectations.